Alpha's unexpected mate. There's a certain magic to growing up in a place like Orion Falls, a town ruled by old families, long-standing legacies, and the ever-present hierarchy of the pack. For most, it's a comfort, knowing exactly where they belong in the grand order of things. For others, like me, it's just a reminder of how far down the ladder you sit. I never fit the mold. While the other girls in my class spent their afternoons perfecting their curls or practicing the graceful shift from human to wolf, I was more likely to be found in the school's tech lab, tinkering with outdated software or trying to fix the vending machine that ate my lunch money. I was an omega, through and through, clumsy, a little too eager, and constantly on the fringes of social gatherings I wasn't actually invited to. And then there was Killian Voss, the next alpha, the one every girl whispered about in the hallways. He wasn't just a student, he was a force. Tall, powerful, and already bearing the sharp edges of leadership that set him apart from the rest of us. Killian wasn't destined to live an ordinary life. He was meant to lead the pack, take over his family's tech empire, and marry some perfect, powerful female wolf who could stand by his side. I didn't envy those girls. Not really. But I did watch him. Not in the obsessive stalker kind of way, at least that's what I told myself, but in the way you watch a shooting star, knowing it'll disappear before you can make a wish. Killian Voss was untouchable, and I was perfectly okay with living in the shadows. Or so I thought. Fast forward a few years, and life has a funny way of playing tricks on you. I'd left behind the awkward girl from high school and stepped into a world I barely recognized. Now, I'm working at Nova Systems, Killian's family business. As a junior developer, I'm still more likely to spill coffee on my keyboard than I am to design groundbreaking software. But I'm here. And somehow Killian Voss is here too. He's no longer the cocky high school alpha in training. Now, he's the heir to the Voss pack, straddling the line between businessman and wolf. And as much as I try to avoid him, fate seems to have other plans. One unexpected night, one mistake, and now there's more than just the pack's hierarchy hanging over my head. I never thought I'd end up here, carrying the future alpha's child, torn between protecting my heart and figuring out what it means to stand beside a man like Killian. But the thing about destiny, it doesn't care if you're ready. And neither does he. Chapter 1. The Unusual Day. Mondays at Nova Systems were the worst. I was already running late, which wasn't unusual, but today felt extra chaotic. My sweater kept slipping off my shoulder. I'd forgotten my lunch at home, and now my coffee was lukewarm at best. Typical. As I walked into the sleek glass building, the cold lobby air hit me, and I hurried toward the elevators. Nova Systems was always buzzing, filled with sharp-dressed employees who looked like they had their lives together. Meanwhile, I was just Ray, the Omega, who worked quietly in the development department and tried not to trip over her own feet. I pushed the elevator button and glanced around, hoping no one noticed me sneak in late. "Morning, Ray." I jumped. Lisa popped up beside me, holding a giant iced coffee in one hand and a half-eaten muffin in the other. "You scared me," I muttered, smoothing my hand. "That's because you weren't paying attention. You were in your own little world again." She nudged me with her elbow. "You hear the news?" I groaned. Lisa always had news. Please tell me it's not about that database project. Jonah's going to kill me if... Not that. This is way better. She leaned in, eyes sparkling. Killian Voss is here. I froze. Killian Voss? Like Killian Voss, the future alpha? The one and only. Lisa nodded dramatically, sipping her iced coffee. He's back from his training and apparently taking a special interest in the development wing. I tried to play it cool, but my stomach did a little flip. Killian wasn't just any alpha. He was the alpha, the heir to Nova Systems and the entire Orion Falls pack. Every unmated wolf in the company probably hoped he'd notice them. I wasn't one of them. Why would he care about the development wing? I asked, trying to sound uninterested. Lisa smirked. I don't know, but maybe he's here to find his mate. She raised her eyebrows at me. I laughed. Yeah, sure. I'm pretty sure the future alpha isn't looking for an omega who spills coffee on her keyboard every other day. Lisa shrugged. You never know. Alphas can be unpredictable. One minute they're running billion-dollar companies, and the next they're sniffing around the quiet girl from IT. I rolled my eyes. Not going to happen. The elevator doors slid open, and we stepped out onto our floor. I made a beeline for my desk in the far corner, glad to finally sink into my chair. Lisa plopped down on the desk next to mine, still munching on her muffin. As I logged in, I tried to focus on work, but Lisa wasn't done. Seriously, Ray, you've been here for years. Maybe Killian's wolf will sense something in you. Seriously, Ray, you've been here for years. Maybe Killian's wolf will sense something in you. I gave her a look. I doubt it. You know, she teased. That sweater isn't exactly screaming future Luna. I glanced down at my oversized knit sweater and jeans. It's comfortable, sure, but comfort doesn't get you noticed by alphas. Lisa grinned. I ignored her and turned to my screen. Killian Voss wasn't going to notice me, and that was perfectly fine. Or so I thought. It wasn't until later that morning that I realized how wrong I was. I had finally started making progress on a bug fix when I got up to refill my coffee. With my cup in one hand, I turned the corner a little too fast and slammed right into someone. The impact sent my coffee flying, splashing straight down the front of the sharpest gray suit I'd ever seen. I froze in horror. My eyes traveled up from the coffee stain to the broad shoulders and finally to the face of the man I'd just drenched. It was hidden behind a scarf. Killian Voss. Oh no. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I opened my mouth to apologize, but no sound came out. I am so sorry, I finally managed, frantically dabbing at his suit with the sleeve of my sweater. I didn't see you there. Killian looked down at his soaked shirt, then at me. His green eyes glinted with something I couldn't quite place. It's fine, he said, his voice calm and low. I can pay for the dry cleaning, or... Killian's lips quirked into the faintest smile. It's just coffee. I stared at him, completely mortified. His gaze lingered a second longer, and for a brief moment, I swore I saw something shift in his expression, like his wolf had surfaced just beneath the surface. I swallowed hard. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, Killian stepped past me, leaving me standing there, holding my empty coffee cup. Lisa's head popped around the corner seconds later. Did you just spill coffee on Killian Voss? She whispered, her eyes wide with barely contained laughter. I groaned, sinking back against the wall. I think I need to quit, Lisa grinned. Or maybe you just mated with the alpha. I buried my face in my hands. This was not how I expected my day to go. Chapter 2. Whispers and Warnings. The office felt quieter after the coffee incident. Maybe it was just my imagination, but every time I passed someone in the hallway, I swore they were holding back a smirk. I sat at my desk, pretending to be busy, but my brain was stuck replaying the moment over and over. Killian Voss. Coffee. Everywhere. At least he hadn't been angry. If anything, he seemed amused. Lisa, of course, hadn't let it go. She spent most of the morning sneaking glances at me and snickering whenever I caught her eye. You know, she said, leaning on the edge of my desk. Some people would call that fate. I didn't even look up. Some people need to mind their own business, she grinned, taking another sip of her oversized iced coffee. I'm just saying, Ray. He didn't seem too upset. Maybe you made an impression. I groaned, rubbing my forehead. Yeah, I'm sure I'm the first Omega to impress an Alpha by spilling coffee on him. Maybe it's a sign. It's not a sign, Lisa. Sure it is. Maybe the universe is telling you to stop hiding under those sweaters and... A door opened near the executive offices, and two voices drifted into the hallway. Lisa and I both went quiet. Not because we were listening on purpose, okay, maybe a little on purpose, but because one of the voices belonged to Jonah, our manager. The other voice was sharp and low. I didn't recognize it, but it had that edge that made my wolf's ears perk up. They weren't talking loudly, but I caught enough to understand the mood. Cutbacks in development. There's no way around it. Cutbacks? I glanced at Lisa, whose eyebrows shot up. She heard it too. Jonah's voice lowered. We can't afford to lose good workers, but if corporate pushes... The rest of the sentence faded as they moved further down the hall. Lisa's lips tightened as she watched the door swing shut behind them. Well, she muttered, tapping her nails against the desk. That's not great. No kidding. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands were fidgeting with the hem of my sweater. Layoffs in development? I wasn't exactly top of the food chain here. If they were looking to let people go, I'd be one of the first out the door. Relax, Lisa said, noticing the panic creeping onto my face. Jonah likes you. You've been here for years. They wouldn't cut you. Jonah likes me because I keep my head down, I replied. I'm not exactly irreplaceable. Lisa narrowed her eyes at me. Maybe that's the problem. What's that supposed to mean? She crossed her arms and leaned forward, her voice dropping like she was about to deliver one of her rare, serious speeches. It means you've been hiding, Ray. You've worked here for 3 years, and no one really knows who you are. You're good at what you do, but you never own it. I'm just doing my job. No, she said firmly. You're surviving. There's a difference. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She wasn't wrong. Lisa sighed and softened her tone. Look, I get it. You don't want to stand out, but sometimes standing out is the only way to stay in the game. You can't keep hiding forever. I shifted in my chair, suddenly uncomfortable under her gaze. It's not that simple, I muttered. Sure it is, she said with a shrug. Take Killian, for example. I groaned. Not this again. Listen, he noticed you. And maybe it was just coffee, but you know what? He remembered your name. You don't think that counts for something? I huffed. It counts for embarrassment. Lisa rolled her eyes. You know what I think? I think the universe just gave you a free pass to stop being invisible. You should use it. I wanted to brush it off. I wanted to believe Killian Voss noticing me was just a fluke. But the way Lisa said it made my chest tighten. What if she was right? It's just a fall, I said. The day stretched on, but the tension didn't fade. Every time Jonah passed by, I felt a little twist of dread in my stomach. I worked late, hoping the extra effort would help me feel useful, maybe even essential. But by the time I packed up, I wasn't sure I'd made much progress. The office was mostly empty by then. Only a few lingering developers sat at their desks, staring at glowing screens. I slung my bag over my shoulder and started toward the elevator. As I crossed the floor, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I stopped. Near the far side of the room, behind the glass wall that separated the executive offices, someone was watching. Killian. He stood there, arms crossed, his gaze locked on me, like he'd been tracking my every move. My heart thudded in my chest. I hesitated for a second too long, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Like he knew I'd noticed him, but was waiting to see what I'd do next. I quickly looked away and practically sprinted to the elevator. By the time the doors closed behind me, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Lisa was wrong. The last thing I needed was for Killian Voss to notice me. More. Chapter 3. Too close for comfort. I thought maybe, just maybe, Killian would forget all about me by the next morning. No such luck. Lisa was already waiting by my desk when I walked in, eyes wide with gossip. Guess who's sitting in on the development meeting today? I groaned, sliding into my chair. Let me guess, Killian Voss? Bingo! She grinned, like it was the best thing that could happen to me. He's taking an interest in the coding teams. I heard Jonah practically had a heart attack when he found out. Great, I muttered, booting up my computer. As if this week wasn't already bad enough. Lisa nudged me. Look on the bright side. Maybe he'll like your ideas. I snorted. Or maybe he'll ask me to fetch him coffee. Lisa smirked. Careful, we know how that ends. I buried my face in my hands. I'm never living that down, am I? Nope. By the time the meeting rolled around, I'd convinced myself Killian wouldn't even notice I was there. I was wrong. Again. The room was already packed when I arrived, most of the junior developers crowding into the farthest chairs, trying to avoid attention. I slipped into a seat near the back, hoping to blend in. Jonah stood at the front, fiddling nervously with his tie. That's when I saw him. Killian. He sat at the head of the table, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place, which, to be fair, he kind of did. His sharp green eyes scanned the room, and the weight of his presence made the air feel heavier. I slid down in my chair, hoping to disappear behind my laptop screen. Lisa caught my eye from across the table and raised her eyebrows, mouthing, "Told you." I ignored her. Jonah cleared his throat. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. We've got some updates on the security framework and a few new project proposals to review. He glanced nervously at Killian. Mr. Voss is here to observe. Killian didn't say anything. He just nodded, which somehow made Jonah even more nervous. The meeting started off normal enough. Jonah rambled about code updates, and the rest of us pretended to pay attention, but the longer Killian sat there, the more I felt like he was watching. I told myself I was imagining it, until he spoke. Westwood. I froze. My eyes shot up from my screen. Killian was staring right at me. Yes? My voice cracked, and I wanted to sink into the floor. Killian tilted his head slightly. You worked on the recent patch for the firewall encryption, right? I blinked. Yes. He nodded slowly, tapping his fingers against the table. Explain your approach. I felt every pair of eyes in the room shift toward me. Heat crept up my neck. Well, the encryption was outdated, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I rewrote parts of the code to streamline the data processing and improve security checks. It reduced lag time by about 10%. Killian didn't say anything for a moment, and I wondered if I'd completely butchered the explanation. Finally, he leaned forward slightly. Why not 15%? I blinked again. 15? You stopped at 10. His eyes locked on mine. Why? I scrambled for an answer, my brain suddenly blank. I thought 10 was efficient enough, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Killian's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Efficient enough, he repeated, like he was testing the words. I gripped the edge of my laptop. I can push for 15 on the next batch. Good. He nodded once. I'd like to see that. And just like that, he shifted his attention back to Jonah, leaving me feeling like I'd just survived a full interrogation. Lisa leaned over and whispered, I think you just got alpha-masted. I sighed. Yeah, I noticed. But deep down, I couldn't help but wonder, why had he singled me out in the first place? What had made him choose me? Chapter 4, After Hours. The office was almost empty by the time I looked up from my screen. Most people had packed up and left hours ago, but I stayed behind, staring at lines of code that blurred together the longer I sat there. My coffee cup had gone cold, and the clock on my monitor flashed 9:42 p.m. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Killian's question from the meeting kept replaying in my head. Why not 15%? I didn't know why it bothered me so much. Maybe it was because he hadn't looked impressed. Or maybe it was because he had paid attention at all. I should have just let it go. But instead, I kept picking at the code, trying to squeeze out that extra 5%. Still here. I nearly jumped out of my chair. Lisa stood in the doorway, holding 2 soda cans and wearing her usual playful grin. You scared me, I muttered, brushing my hair out of my face. She walked in and plopped down in the chair next to me, handing me one of the cans. I figured you'd still be glued to your desk. You get weird when you're stressed. I'm not stressed, I lied. Lisa popped open her drink. Right. And I love waking up early. I cracked open the soda and took a sip, the fizzy sweetness waking me up a little. Lisa glanced at my screen. You're really going for it, huh? Trying to impress the alpha? It's not about that, I said quickly. I don't want him thinking I can't handle my job. Lisa arched a brow. I don't think that's what he was thinking. I groaned and dropped my head on the desk. Can we not talk about it? Lisa laughed. Fine. But seriously, Ray, you work too hard sometimes. I lifted my head. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is when you let it eat you alive. Lisa leaned back, spinning her chair slightly. You're good at this stuff, but you're so scared of being noticed that you hold yourself back. I like not being noticed. No, you like being safe. Lisa gave me a knowing look. But being safe isn't going to get you anywhere, especially not when the alpha is literally watching you. I frowned at her. Killian isn't watching me. Lisa smirked. You sure about that? I rolled my eyes and focused back on my screen. He just asked a question. It's not like he's singling me out for some big promotion or anything. Maybe not, Lisa shrugged. But he could have called out anyone during that meeting, and he chose you. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words caught in my throat. Why had he called on me? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep doing my job. Lisa stared at me for a moment before a slow smile spread across her face. What? I asked, narrowing my eyes. I forgot to tell you, she said casually, like it wasn't a big deal. You've been invited to the Nova Systems Holiday Gala. I froze. Wait, what? Lisa grinned. Jonah handed out invites this afternoon. You weren't at your desk, so I grabbed yours. She dug into her bag and pulled out a fancy-looking envelope, sliding it across my desk. I stared at it like it might bite me. It's not my thing, I mumbled, pushing the envelope away. Lisa gave me a look. Ray, it's one night. You can't hide behind your laptop forever. I hesitated. The idea of walking into a room full of executives and pack elites sounded like a nightmare. But Lisa wasn't wrong. I did hide. And maybe part of me was curious about the gala, and maybe even about Killian. I sighed. Okay, I said. About the gala. My head ached. Lisa grinned. That's all I needed to hear. As she left the office, the envelope sat on my desk, practically glowing in the dim light. I didn't know if going to the gala was a mistake, but I had a feeling it was the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. Chapter 5. The Wake-Up Call. I stared at my screen, watching the error message flash for the 5th time in a row. Seriously? I ran the program again, praying that the bug would magically disappear. It didn't. Come on, I muttered under my breath, leaning closer like that would somehow fix the code. It didn't. I groaned and dropped my head under my desk. The firewall encryption update was supposed to be a simple patch, something I could handle with my eyes closed, but somewhere along the way, I'd messed up. Badly. And if I couldn't figure it out soon, Jonah was going to notice. I glanced at the clock. 6:45 p.m. The office was nearly empty, except for a few quiet hums of computers left on by other late workers. Most people had gone home hours ago, but I was still here, desperately trying to prove I wasn't as replaceable as I felt. Lisa popped her head around the corner of my cubicle, holding her coat over one arm. Ray, it's late, she said. Go home. I waved her off. Can't. I need to finish this. Lisa frowned and leaned against the desk. You've been sitting there for hours. What's going on? I sighed. I messed up the encryption update. I can't figure out where. She squinted at my screen, then shrugged. So fix it tomorrow. Jonah won't fire you for one bad patch. Maybe not for one, but there's talk about layoffs, remember? I ran a hand through my hair, pushing it out of my face. If I keep screwing up, I'll be the first to go. Lisa didn't say anything at first. Then, after a pause, she tilted her head. You know what I think? I didn't look at her. I'm sure you'll tell me anyway. I think you're so scared of messing up that you are messing up. I finally glanced up. That's not helpful. Lisa smiled softly, but there was something serious in her eyes. Look, Ray, I get it. You don't want to stand out, but sometimes blending in too much means no one notices you at all. I opened my mouth to argue, but she cut me off. Jonah knows you're good, she continued. But Killian? He saw something in you during that meeting. Maybe he pushed you for a reason. I snorted. Yeah, to make sure I knew how much more work I need to do. Or maybe he saw potential. I shook my head. Killian Voss doesn't care about junior developers, Lisa. Maybe not, but if he's going to notice anyone, why not you? I wanted to laugh, but the words sank deeper than I expected. Lisa watched me for a moment, then smiled. By the way, did you check your email? I frowned. No, why? Jonah's been passing out invites to the Nova Systems holiday gala. Big fancy thing, you're on the list. I blinked. Wait, what? Lisa grinned. You heard me. Black tie, expensive drinks, and lots of powerful people. It's next weekend. I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Jonah wouldn't send me to something like that. Well, he did. I opened my email, scrolling until I found it. Sitting right at the top of my inbox, Nova Systems Holiday Gala, formal attire required. I stared at the screen. Lisa nudged me. It's a big deal, Ray, you should go. I don't even own a dress for something like this, I muttered. Lisa shrugged. We'll find one. But seriously, this is your chance to stop hiding. I swallowed hard. The idea of being at a party filled with executives and Killian made me want to crawl under my desk. But as Lisa grabbed her bag and walked away, I realized she was right. Maybe this was the wake-up call I needed. Chapter 6. All I knew was that the neckline dipped a little lower than I was used to, and the heels were higher than I liked. You look great, Lisa whispered beside me, sensing my nerves. Stop fidgeting. I forced a smile and tried to stand a little straighter. Across the room, executives and managers mingled, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. Somewhere in that crowd was Killian Voss. I hadn't seen him yet, but his presence hung over the room like a storm cloud waiting to roll in. I was just hoping to avoid lightning. Come on, Lisa said, pulling me toward the bar. Let's get a drink. You'll relax once you're holding something fancy. I let her drag me along, dodging small clusters of people. A few familiar faces nodded politely, but no one stopped to chat. I was fine with that. The bartender handed me a sparkling drink in a delicate glass. I took a sip, trying not to wrinkle my nose at the bubbly taste. Lisa grinned. See? Not so bad. I opened my mouth to respond, but then it happened. I felt it before I saw him. The air shifted. Just slightly, but enough to make my wolf stir beneath the surface. Killian. I turned my head, and there he was, stepping into the room like he owned it. He wore a tailored black suit, and even from across the ballroom, I could feel the weight of his presence. His gaze swept the crowd slowly, like he was searching for something. Or someone. I looked away quickly, pretending to focus on my drink. Relax, Lisa whispered, bumping my shoulder. You're not going to turn invisible by staring at your glass. I'd like to try, I muttered. Lisa laughed softly. He probably doesn't even remember the coffee incident. But Lisa was wrong, because a few minutes later, I caught Killian watching me. I froze, gripping the stem of my glass a little tighter. His eyes met mine across the room, and instead of looking away, he held my gaze. I felt my heart thud once, loud and heavy. Lisa noticed. "Uh-oh." "What?" I whispered. "He's coming over here." I almost dropped my drink. "What?" But before I could escape, Killian was standing in front of us. "Evening," he said smoothly, his eyes flicking between Lisa and me. "Enjoying the gala?" Lisa flashed him a bright smile. "Oh, absolutely. Ray was just saying how much she loves fancy parties." I shot her a glare. Killian's lips twitched like he was fighting a smile. "Is that so?" "Totally," Lisa said, clearly having too much fun. "I'm going to, check out the desserts." She slipped away, leaving me standing there alone. I swallowed, glancing up at Killian. I think she's lying. "I figured," he replied, tilting his head slightly. "You don't seem like the gala type." I exhaled a small laugh. "That obvious?" He smirked. "A little." I shifted on my heels, unsure what to say next. Killian Voss was standing in front of me, casually making small talk like this was normal. It wasn't. Not for me. "So," he said, leaning slightly against the bar, "you like working in development?" I blinked like a snake. Of all the things he could have asked, that wasn't what I expected. "Yeah," I said slowly. "It's quiet. I like coding." Killian nodded thoughtfully. "You're good at it." I blinked again. "You don't have to say that." "I don't say things I don't mean." His tone was casual, but something about the way he said it made my wolf perk up. "I still have a lot to learn. That's not a bad thing." Killian's eyes softened, and for a second he didn't seem so intimidating. "Most people stop trying to learn once they're comfortable." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just nodded. A brief silence passed between us. The ballroom buzzed with laughter and conversation, but somehow it felt quieter where we stood. Then Killian did something that made my heart stop. He leaned a little closer, his voice dropping just enough for only me to hear. "I meant what I said in the meeting. I'd like to see what you can do." My cheeks warmed. Before I could respond, he lifted his hand slightly and motioned to the bartender. "Another drink?" he asked, his eyes still on me. I hesitated, then nodded. As the bartender poured the drink, Killian didn't move away. He stayed close, and for the first time since I started working at Nova Systems, I felt like I wasn't invisible. Maybe Lisa was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Chapter 7. Closer Than Expected. I wasn't sure how it happened, but somehow I ended up standing next to Killian for most of the gala. At first, I thought he'd leave after offering me that second drink, maybe give a polite nod and walk off to talk to someone important, like a CEO or an alpha from another pack. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed. He asked me questions about my work, listened when I answered, and even laughed a few times at my awkward jokes. And the weirdest part? I wasn't completely terrified. I kept waiting for that crushing sense of, "You don't belong here. to hit, but it never fully came. Sure, I still felt out of place in the room full of expensive suits and sparkling gowns, but standing next to Killian made it easier. "Well," Lisa said, suddenly appearing at my side as Killian stepped away to greet someone. "This is going way better than I thought." I gave her a look. "You thought this was gonna go badly." "I thought you'd spill something on him again by now." "Not helpful, Lisa." She grinned. "I'm just saying, Killian Voss doesn't stick around to make small talk with just anyone, especially not for this long." I fiddled with my bracelet, trying not to read too much into it. "He's probably just been watching you like a hawk all night." I glanced toward Killian. Sure enough, his eyes flicked back to me from across the room. The moment our gazes met, my heart did this weird, nervous jump. Lisa noticed. "Uh-huh. Polite, right?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. Killian started making his way back toward me, and suddenly it felt like all the air in the room was gone. Lisa smirked. I let him go away. "Wait." I grabbed for her arm, but she slipped away too quickly, disappearing into the crowd. Killian returned, standing just a little too close. His presence was overwhelming in the best and worst way. "Your friend likes to vanish at convenient times," he said, glancing toward the spot where Lisa had been. "She does that," I replied, not quite meeting his eyes. Killian watched me for a second longer, and I could feel the weight of his gaze. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it made my wolf stir nervously under my skin. "Come with me," he said suddenly, his voice soft but firm. I blinked. "What?" Killian tilted his head toward the balcony doors. "It's crowded in here. Let's step outside." I hesitated, glancing around the ballroom. Lisa was nowhere in sight, and I could practically feel the stares from other wolves as Killian waited for my answer. "You could say no," but I didn't want to. "Okay." Killian placed his hand lightly on my lower back as we walked toward the balcony. His touch was barely there, but it sent a shiver up my spine. The balcony was quiet and cold, but in a refreshing way. The stars stretched wide over the city skyline, and for a moment, everything felt still. Killian leaned against the railing, his eyes flicking toward me. "Better out here?" I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. Yeah, I needed some air. He studied me for a moment, his gaze softer than usual. "You don't like crowds." It wasn't a question. "No," I admitted. "Not really." Killian smirked faintly. "I could tell. You've been eyeing the exits since you got here." I huffed a quiet laugh. "That obvious, huh?" "A little." The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't awkward, just calm. I found myself glancing at him from the corner of my eye, wondering why he was spending so much time with me when there were plenty of high-ranking wolves inside. "Can I ask you something?" I said softly, turning toward him. Killian looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Go ahead." "Why are you out here with me?" I fiddled with my bracelet again. "I mean, you could be inside, talking to people who actually matter. The alphas, the CEOs, people like that." Killian's eyes stayed on me, but he snapped his fingers behind him. "Do you think you don't matter?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm just saying." "You're wrong." His voice was quiet but firm. I blinked up at him, caught off guard. "I don't waste my time," he said simply. If I didn't want to be out here with you, I wouldn't be. I didn't know how to respond to that. Killian's gaze dipped lower for half a second toward my lips. I caught it, and I swore the air got heavier. I shifted nervously, brushing my hair behind my ear. I still don't get it. He leaned in, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. Maybe that's the problem, he said, his voice low. Before I could process what that meant, Killian closed the distance between us. His lips brushed mine, soft and brief, but enough to send my heart racing. The kiss lasted only a moment, but it felt like everything else faded away. And then, just like that, he pulled back, his expression unreadable again. "I'll see you inside," he said quietly, his voice lingering in the cold air. And before I could say anything, Killian slipped back into the ballroom, leaving me standing there under the stars, completely stunned. Chapter 8. I woke up somewhere, running my arm, for years. Begging. Saw language. Killian Voss. Alpha. The guy everyone's been drooling over for years. Spanking paused. My face burned. It was just a kiss. Lisa's eyes widened like I'd said something crazy. "Just a kiss?" She shook her head. "You're unbelievable. Do you know how many girls would kill to trade places with you right now?" I sighed, tugging at the hem of my dress. "It's not a big deal, Lisa. He was probably just testing your lip gloss," Lisa interrupted. "Come on, Ray. You can't keep acting like this means nothing." I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just saying. I don't want to read too much into it." Lisa crossed her arms, giving me that look, the one that meant she wasn't going to drop it. "Okay," she said slowly. "Let's break this down. Killian Voss could have kissed anyone tonight, but he didn't. He kissed you, alone, on the balcony, under the stars. Do I need to keep going? You're not saying the least of it. You're just saying that because you have to." I chewed my lip, staring at the floor. I just don't get why. Lisa threw her hands up. "Maybe he likes you. Is that so hard to believe?" Yeah," I laughed nervously. "He's the future alpha. I'm just..." "Ray, I sit in the development department and fix code." Lisa's eyes softened. "You really don't see it, do you?" "See what? You're not just Ray," Lisa said. "You're smart." The gala ended an hour later, and I was more than ready to go home. My feet were killing me, my head felt scrambled, and every time I thought about that kiss, my stomach flipped. By the time I collapsed into bed, I'd convinced myself the whole thing didn't mean anything. Killian probably didn't even remember it. But the next morning, I found out just how wrong I was. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when my inbox pinged. New email from Jonah Reynolds. I clicked it without thinking until I saw the subject line. Project invitation. Killian Voss initiative. My heart stopped. I reread it twice, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Jonah was asking me to assist on Killian's personal tech initiative, a high-profile security overhaul for Nova Systems. I blinked at the screen. Why me? Lisa walked by my desk at that exact moment, sipping her iced coffee. She glanced at the email and froze mid-sip. Wait, she pointed at the screen. Is that what I think it is? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Her eyes practically bulged. Ray, this is huge. I know, I muttered. I don't get it what you do, and, you know? The kiss. I gave her a look. You seriously think that's why? Lisa shrugged. I'm just saying, he's obviously interested. This could be his way of keeping you close. I frowned, unsure how to feel about that. Don't overthink it, Lisa said, nudging me with her elbow. This is a big opportunity. You deserve it. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, maybe. But as I stared at the email, doubt crept in. Sure, it was exciting, and sure, Lisa was probably right. But there was still one thing I couldn't shake. Killian Voss wasn't just an ordinary guy, and working with him this closely, it felt dangerous. Chapter 9, Second Thoughts. I stared at the email for what felt like forever. Project Invitation. Killian Voss Initiative. The words seemed to glare at me from the screen. Jonah had forwarded the project details with a short note. Good work lately, Ray. Killian asked for you by name. Let me know if you're in. I was not in. There was no way I could handle working that closely with Killian Voss. It was one thing to bump into him at meetings or awkwardly kiss him at a gala. Still trying to process that. But being part of his personal project? Too much. The last thing I needed was Killian hovering over my shoulder, watching my every move. I reached for my mouse, ready to reply with a polite, "No thank you." But before I could, Lisa appeared, like she had some kind of radar for these situations. Is that? Where is favorite place on the... What's that? She asked, peering over my screen. I tilted it away. Nothing important. Lisa narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Uh-huh. Move your hand. I sighed and let her see the email. Her eyes widened. Are you kidding me? Ray, this is huge. Yeah, huge in a stressful way, I muttered. I'm not doing it. Lisa's jaw dropped. Wait, you're turning it down? I shrugged. I don't know. I feel like I'm not the right person for this. He probably just picked me because I was in the room. Lisa gave me a look. He knows the entire development team, Ray. He didn't pick you randomly. Maybe he felt bad about the coffee thing. I joked weakly. She crossed her arms. Or maybe he thinks you're actually good at your job. Ever considered that? I fidgeted with my bracelet, avoiding eye contact. Lisa sighed and sat on the edge of my desk. Look, I know Killian's intimidating, but this is your chance. You've been flying under the radar for years. This project could be exactly what you need to stand out. I don't want to stand out, I said, sinking lower in my chair. You can't keep hiding forever. Lisa's voice softened. You're good at what you do. Killian knows it. Jonah knows it. I know it. The only person who doesn't seem to know it is you. I didn't answer. Because part of me knew she was right. I chewed on my bottom lip, staring at the email. What if I screw it up? I asked quietly. Lisa rolled her eyes. Then you fix it and move on. Ray, nobody expects you to be perfect, but you have to give yourself a chance. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the reply button. Before I could change my mind, Lisa nudged my arm. Can you trust me, Lisa? Breathing heavily, I let myself accept my first apology. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the reply button. Before I could change my mind, Lisa nudged me again, knowingly shaking her head. As it stared at me, faithfully leading me forward, I couldn't help but laugh at Lisa. Say yes. With a deep breath, I typed out a short response. I'm in. I hit send. There, Lisa said with a grin. That wasn't so hard, was it? I guess not. But as the email disappeared from my outbox, I made one silent promise to myself. I'd do the project, but I was going to avoid Killian Voss as much as humanly possible. Chapter 10. No Way Out. I should have known saying yes to Killian's project was a mistake. The email seemed harmless enough at first. Basic instructions from Jonah about the project timeline, some coding specs, and a list of team members. I skimmed it casually until I reached the last line. Lead junior developer, Ray Westwood. I stared at it for a full minute, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. Lead? I muttered, squinting at the screen. That can't be right. Before I could overthink it, Lisa leaned over my shoulder, reading along. Wow, she said, smirking. Look at you. Moving up in the world. This has to be a mistake. I mumbled, scrolling through the email again like Jonah might have secretly written, just kidding, at the bottom. Nope, still there. Lisa patted my shoulder dramatically. Congrats, boss. I always knew you had it in you. Don't, I groaned, burying my face in my hands. Lisa laughed. Come on, Ray. This is a good thing. You're basically running point on Killian Voss's project. Do you know how good that looks on a resume? I peeked at her through my fingers. You mean the project where he'll probably hover over me the entire time and question everything I do? Lisa shrugged. It's fine. Just don't spill coffee on him again. Not helpful. I didn't have time to dwell on it. By the afternoon, Jonah called the entire project team into a conference room. I arrived early, settling into one of the chairs near the end of the table. Maybe, if I stayed quiet enough, no one would notice me. The rest of the team filtered in slowly. Senior developers, a few engineers, and some other junior staff. Jonah entered last, right behind Killian. The moment Killian walked in, the room felt smaller. His presence did that. He wore the same calm, unreadable expression he always had, his sharp green eyes scanning the table as if deciding who would survive the meeting. I sat up straighter, hoping to blend in. Jonah cleared his throat. All right, everyone. Thanks for coming. This project is top priority, so let's get started. He gestured toward Killian. As you all know, Mr. Voss will be overseeing everything directly. Killian nodded, his gaze sweeping over the group. I won't take much of your time, he said smoothly. I trust everyone here is capable of handling their role. I almost relaxed, until he spoke again. I've appointed Ray Westwood as the lead junior developer for this initiative. I felt every eye in the room shift toward me. My stomach twisted. Killian's gaze rested on me for a beat longer than necessary. but his face gave nothing away. I tried to act normal, but I could feel Lisa's smug look from across the table. Killian continued. We'll have regular meetings to check progress. Make sure any updates go through Ray first. Great. Now I was the middleman for Killian Voss. The rest of the meeting blurred by. Jonah discussed timelines, assigned tasks, and answered questions. I took notes quietly, hoping no one would ask me anything directly. Toward the end, Jonah turned to Killian. Anything else you'd like to add? Killian glanced at his watch. That's all for now. Ray, stay for a minute after. My heart skipped. Lisa caught my eye and mouthed, "Good luck." I shot her a glare. When the room emptied, I stayed glued to my chair, fiddling with my pen. Killian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. For a moment, I wondered if he forgot I was still there. Finally, he spoke without turning around. "I know this isn't the role you expected." I hesitated. "No, it's not." His head tilted slightly. "Do you have a problem with it?" I blinked. "What? No, I mean, I'm fine. It's just unexpected." Killian turned then, his eyes meeting mine. Good. That was it. Just good. Before I could ask why he picked me, or what I was even supposed to be doing, Killian grabbed his tablet from the table. "I'll expect updates by the end of the week," he said coolly. "Jonah can fill you in on the details." I opened my mouth to say something, but Killian was already heading for the door. He paused just long enough to glance over his shoulder. "Don't overthink it, Ray." And with that, he was gone. I sat there, gripping my pen a little too tightly, frustration bubbling under the surface. Lisa's words echoed in my head. Maybe he likes you. But standing in that empty conference room, I couldn't tell if Killian's distant attitude was interest or if I was just imagining everything.